Hey guys, welcome in. So, without further ado, episode 4 of Starfleet Academy. Let's dive right in. Straight off the bat, I'm gonna tell you right now, I loved this episode a hell of a lot more than last week's episode. This one was a lot more emotional and addressed some elephants in the room that I have been hoping would finally get addressed. Specifically, the Klingons in general as a species. You have to understand that when Discovery came around, when Michael Burnham and the Discovery and stuff, when they went into the far future, they jumped 900 years from their time period, 800 years from like the Voyager timeline and whatnot, and Deep Space Nine. Regardless, they jumped really far into the future. They found out, of course, that the Federation and the galaxy as they knew it was completely different. The burn event happened, detonated all the dilithium across the galaxy, or made it inert if it was in warp cores. Huge crisis. So, they show up, the Discovery does a lot of heavy lifting for the Federation, helps reestablish things, reconnect worlds, bring people back into the fold. I digress. But the one group that never got addressed was the Klingon Empire. And I had always been asking, I was like, okay, well, what about the Klingons? We know about everybody else, but what about them? Well, we finally have an answer. Thanks to the episode, we now know that the Klingon Empire suffered catastrophic losses when the burn occurred. Decimation of their home world, their home system, the entire Klingon defense fleet. All of these things were just wiped. Down to the point that we know, at least from what I remember in the episode, we know that only 8 of the great houses remain at this point in time. And that the Klingons, by official designation, are, for lack of better terms, an endangered species now. But the reason why they are in the position they're in, still to this point, despite so many years after the burn, is simply because they closed themselves off to any kind of aid. Because charity to them is dishonorable. They want to take things by conquest, and they feel like they have to earn the right to survive, the whole warrior culture thing. So the show does a really good job of highlighting, giving us just enough to understand at least where things are at. But it doesn't tell us everything, obviously. I mean, I'm sure they'll address more maybe later in a different media format, maybe more in the show, who knows. But Jaden, the character which seems to be the main focus of this episode, the Klingon, originally I did not think much of him, but this episode has done wonders on the way I see him now. To the point that I actually now appreciate him more as a character because of this episode than when they first introduced him. He always seemed like an outcast for a Klingon. I was always getting that vibe of like Alexander, the son of Worf. He's a Klingon, but doesn't really want to be a traditional Klingon, and they seem to be keeping that up in this episode as well, showcasing that Jaden's desire to be more of a medic, a scientist, and an explorer, and less of a life-taking warrior seeking honor and glory in the battlefield. His parents, his family, obviously, he has like a whole division with them, and I like the messages behind it. The entire theme of the episode is about Jaden coming to terms with the fact that his past may not have been the way he had perceived it, accepting who he is, and realizing that he is a warrior despite the fact that his family tried to tell him he wasn't, and that just because he doesn't want to fight in the traditional sense does not make him less of a Klingon either. And obviously the Federation, in the background, the subplot, are able to do like a mock battle situation with the Klingons to convince them to take ownership of a world that they found that matches all the thermal and geographical, technobabble terms required for a new Klingon homeworld. Because the Klingons were never going to take it from charity. So, they do the whole mock battle thing to claim it as spoils of conquest. Which, obviously the leaders of both sides, they kind of they nod at each other. They know it wasn't a real battle, but it's the respect, it's the honoring of traditions that I think was respected in the end. And I think that's what the Klingons were really wanting. They didn't want to ever sit back and say that they were just handed a world. I digress. I'm getting a little off topic. So obviously, the subplot was like there's like a debate going on between the students. Jaden's heated because he finds out that his family may not be around anymore. He wants to argue. He wants to bring the Klingons, diaspora as they call it in their whole situation, to be the debate topic. Everyone tries to protest against it. He insists. So that's what the debate's mostly about. But again, it's not the main focus, and I kind of like it. The episode felt a lot more character focused. It was a lot more emotional. It did some big world building as far as Klingons are concerned in this time period. These are the things that I like about Star Trek. And it also had the subtle messages, which I also appreciate. The whole idea of coming to terms with who you really are as a person, finding acceptance in that despite what others may have put on you as an expectation. I like the messagery. Star Trek has always been about that kind of thing, and I appreciate it, because last week's episode definitely felt more like a high school drama style filler episode, which is unfortunate considering it was supposed to be an important character moment for one of the other characters of the show. But hey, you win some, you lose some. Ultimately, there's a lot to unpack in this episode. I love it. Jaden, by the end of the episode, phenomenal character now. I really want to see where he goes with things. Obviously, yes, there was a moment during the episode where it did seem that him and one of the other characters have a bit of a tension going on. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I did pick up on it. That being said, it is a school-based series, so it makes sense that we're gonna start having love triangles and all these other things start popping up later on. But it's Starfleet. Inevitably, all these kids are going to end up being assigned on ships on different parts of the galaxy and whatnot. So, let them have their fun when they can. Anyway, I'm rambling about that. But ultimately, yes, this episode was really good. It was very solid. Definitely pulled at my heartstrings at a couple points, especially with the not so subtle messagery, I guess, in the background about finding acceptance and things. I know people are going to have, different opinions, especially considering it does involve Klingons, and the Klingons are a very core race. But this is also Klingon culture after 800 years since the last time we saw them in, like, Star Trek Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise. 800 years is a lot of development, both technological, evolution, all these different things. So there's no telling what's changed about them. But ultimately, Jaden as a character, he's basically like Alexander Worf's son, if Worf's son went to Starfleet Academy and really did double down on not wanting to be a warrior like his father. So a Klingon that's not a traditional Klingon doesn't bother me either. I actually want to see what they do with his character. Which, because it also brings up another question is, Klingon society was warrior-based, sure, but they still had to have scientists, engineers, and other type of people, to help them get the technology they had to the point that they became a star-based empire. You know what I mean? So, I digress. What did you think about episode 4? I could talk about it for a while. I guess, again, this one impressed me. I think of the show so far, this one is an episode that I enjoyed the most. But anyway, those are just some of my thoughts about episode 4 of Starfleet Academy. But you know the drill. Stay kind, stay humble, may the force be with you. I'll see y'all in the next review. And until then, take care.